What happened when you caught your significant other cheating? Story 1. I dated the cutest little doll-faced pixie-type hipster chick for about 4 years. Lived together, the whole deal. Turns out, this sweet little girl was a fricking chronic cheater. Like, she literally could not keep her panties on. Girlfriend said she was out with the ladies, but I caught her being dropped off by an acquaintance of mine after a date they had together. Dude, in a panic, said, I forgot you two were dating. Or some poo. Even though he was at our housewarming party 2 months prior. I guess she'd left her phone in his car, so we drove back to our house to give it to her, and I answered the door. He looked stunned. I wasn't supposed to be home. As was I. Girlfriend ran to the door and stood between us, and I could hear her breathing, and it was different. Like, I could hear the panic in her lungs. She started talking real fast, trying to explain to me why this guy I've only ever seen at parties and poo had her phone in his car. And he just stood there trying to go along with it. I put 2 and 2 together, like suddenly processing weeks of old events really rapidly in my mind, and realised this was in fact a scenario of infidelity, and it has been going on for some time. I tossed him into the front yard. He stood next to his car with the door open trying to apologise. I shoved him in his car and told him to drive off before I broke his nose. That sucker looked so scared that I oddly looked back on that awful moment with a bit of pride and confidence in my manliness. But of course I took her back. Months later, my best friend, female, walked in on her sleeping with said best friend's roommates, also female. Best friend drove over to my house immediately and told me. Turns out she'd been with at least 5 other people, men and women, while we were together. Going to the cabin with the girls? Nope. A week-long frick fest with another person. Going to a festival with the family? Nope. Naughties and booze with another. I was so fricking naive not to see it. But so it goes with young love. You never would have guessed this girl was a witch by looking at her. Not all these chicks look like scumbag Stacey. Anyway, when we started dating originally, I'd left the army to go to university. During one of the last conversations we had throughout the awful and complicated common law breakup process, she said, "Whatever you do, please don't join the army again. I couldn't handle you being hurt." Yeah, frick you, witch. Re-enlisted as soon as possible, and 4 years later, I've never been happier. Anyway, never take back a cheater. P.S. Frick you, Catherine. Catherine, you naughty piece of work. Not good. Do you know, I really do believe the once a cheat, always a cheat saying, because anyone I know in my personal life that's cheated has done it more than once, no matter the remorse they've shown. Do you know what I mean? Can anyone agree with that? I'm definitely not one to judge here, holding my hands up. You don't know what situations people are in or the reasoning behind it sometimes, but most of the time I do think it takes a proper nasty person to cheat on someone, because it just boils down to selfishness at the end of the day, isn't it? Like, you can easily just break up with the person you're with if you no longer want them. Again, depending on the scenario you're in, but it must fully suck being cheated on. And sorry for anyone that's been through that here, gang. Like, this is a big frick you to anyone who has cheated on someone, okay? You will get your comeuppance, scumbags. But anyway, back to Positive Ashley now. Let's move on to the next. Story 2. We've been dating for over a year, and we made plans to go out for my birthday once I got off work that day. So I went into work as usual, and they announced over the loudspeaker that it was my birthday. My boss looks at me and asks me what the frick I'm doing here on my birthday. I laughed and just said working. He shakes his head at me and tells me to go home and get lucky because he's kicking me out with a paid day off. Figured I would take his advice, so I went and got her some roses and went over to her place. The side door was open, so I knocked as I usually do to just come in. But this time there was no answer. But I heard the TV blaring, so I figured she was either watching TV or still sleeping in like she does on her days off. So I walked in with her roses in hand and went back to her bedroom to surprise her. The door was partially open, and I just barely walked in to see her on top of some other guy, both fully naked and going at it. At that point, I just blanked out for what seemed like forever. I eventually turned around and went to her roommate's room to grab one of her softball bats. I grabbed one and started walking back with a bat in one hand and roses in another. I stopped inches away from her door and stood there for what felt like another eternity. And for some reason, I started to think about what my boss said about going home and getting lucky. I realised I did get lucky, that I came home to see this and not find out 10 to 20 years later after having several kids to find out what kind of person she was. I turned and walked away, left the bat on the kitchen table and let her roommate's dog out of the basement where they keep him since he would instantly poo everywhere once left out. and I locked the door behind me so I wouldn't stupidly go back. Come time for our date, and she called several times, and I just ignored it for about an hour until I finally answered. She's upset because she couldn't get a hold of me, and we were going to be late for our date, as if nothing ever happened. Clearly, she never knew I was there. I told her, I know what you did today, and it's over. And she started to say something about not breaking up, and I just hung up and disconnected the phone and went to visit my sister, who appreciated the roses that I gave her. Okay, wait. So why is he giving her roses on his birthday? Shouldn't it be the other way around? I'm confused, or have I read that wrong? Someone inform me. Or is he just a really lovely boyfriend going to give his girlfriend roses and then finds out she's sat on some other guy's D? Not good. But do you know what? Props to you for taking it in your stride and thinking, do you know what? I did get lucky here because I've realised that you are a cheating little witch and I need to get out of this relationship. So that is a good way to look at it. Although it still doesn't, it's not an excuse and it doesn't make up for the hurt, but you're a brave person. And I can see that. By looking into my crystal ball, I can see that you're a brave and strong person. Story 3. I came over to surprise her. I walked in on her naked, taking selfies on her phone. Ooh. She tried to play it off that it was me she was sending them to, which I believed at the time. She put her phone on the nightstand and we started messing around. About an hour later, she fell asleep, and I picked up her iPhone to go plug it into the charger. When I plugged it in, the display was a picture of another guy's junk and it said, "Thanks for the pics. Here's one to return the favour." This was followed by him sending several more dong pics in succession along with texts referencing last weekend, and a frick ton of those stupid emojis and winky faces. Like seriously, each text had a winky face. You gotta be subtle, dude. Anywho, so I did what any guy would rationally do. Sent the dong pics to my email, went on her computer which was in a separate room, printed out like 25 copies of the first pic and proceeded to tape them up all over her room. I sent her a text saying, bye, then blocked her number, grabbed all the hoodies I'd let her borrow during our time together. Guys, don't sacrifice them when a relationship goes south. And left. I saw her a couple months later. She dropped out of school to be with this guy, and then a year later, she ended up having his kid. The funniest part is that the guy's wife wasn't happy when he tried to convince her that he adopted a new baby. I'm sure the guy's wife was not happy when he randomly adopted a new baby. That's probably one of the worst excuses in the book so far. Come on. You're not just going to get a baby out of thin air without speaking to your partner first, are you? You nutsack. Anyway, what's everyone's thoughts on their partners taking naked selfies? Because I can't lie, right? If I'm feeling myself here and there, I might take a quick little selfie just for the books, but it obviously wouldn't be for anyone. It would just be for myself, or it would be for my partner. So not all the time, if you catch someone doing that, does it mean they're sending selfies to people? So just take that into consideration. But obviously in this scenario, it was that. And sorry about that, bro, but that's tough. But love what you done to get back at her. Tape them all around her room. Show her what a real douchebag she's been. Story 4. When I was 18, I decided to skip class one morning and surprise my on and off again boyfriend. We'd been living together for about 3 years, but the months prior to this were extremely rocky. I stopped at a few payphones to try and call ahead, but no one picked up. Okay, I thought, no problem. I'll just go ahead and wake him up. As I crept up the stairs with 2 honeydew iced coffees, one in each hand, I heard a female laugh. His little sister must have stayed home from school. I turned the corner and entered his room to find him laying in bed with some half-naked girl. I froze up and all I could say was, "Hi." He said, "Hi," back, and we stared at each other for a minute before I ran out of the house. He chased me outside while proclaiming the infamous, "It's not what it looks like," line. As I was about to get into my car, I screamed, "But she's freaking ugly," at the top of my lungs. His response? He screamed, "I know," as loud as he could. That poor girl. I wish I'd thrown the iced coffees at them instead. Lol, that was probably the funniest response ever. No. He said, "I know," and the girl was still in there. She must have felt like a bag of poo. Just been caught by his missus, probably didn't know he had a girlfriend, and just been called ugly. Can it get any worse, hun? Do you know what I mean? Gosh, I couldn't imagine actually walking in to see that. That would be the worst feeling in the world. Guys, if this has happened to you, anyone watching, please comment that first feeling you feel when you instantly see that? What is your emotions? Like, what is going on? Story 5. I was in the Navy and was out on deployment for 6 months after just recently getting engaged. It's one of those stupid things that young military guys do. One day, I got a letter from my fiance's best friend telling me that she caught my fiance and her boyfriend together. This was years before email and smartphones were common. We write back and forth several times, and eventually it comes out how she caught them, how my fiance begged her not to tell me, and that the fiance didn't know that we were corresponding. I eventually got back to the States and planned to play it off as though I didn't know. But too many of my friends intercepted me with the news that it wasn't just the one guy, but several, and let me know that she knew that I was aware. Eventually we met, and the confrontation was minimal and tame. We broke off the engagement without a lot of drama. She kept the ring. The best friend and I ended up hooking up, at first as sort of a revenge frick kind of thing, but then it turned serious. We celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary this year. Can't believe you let her keep the ring. But all in all, good for you guys. Congrats. Story 6. I brought home groceries one evening after work and found my boyfriend fricking what I think was his co-worker. I only ever met her once, mind you. This is in my apartment, in my bed, which just made everything that much worse. He still lived with his parents at the time. The entire scenario became extremely stupid after that. I dumped an entire gallon of milk all over them and chucked everything humanly possible within grabbing range. Looking back, it was kind of awesome clocking the chick in the head with the package of hot dogs. And no matter how soft bread is, it hurts when you throw a loaf of it squarely at someone's dong. They left half naked in the snow. I never returned their belongings they left behind. He's now married to her, so frick if I know what happened. I'm sure they can tell their kids. We bonded over groceries. First, sorry you had to deal with it. It sucks no matter who you are. Second, I totally saw the scene play out in my head as you described it, and it was hilarious. Yeah, no, to be fair, the scene's playing out in my head, and it is pretty jokes. I'm imagining like a loaf of bread hitting a dong, hot dogs hitting heads, like kettles being thrown, dog food up in the air. Do you know what I mean? Just like a proper hectic scenario. But that is great stuff. Story 7. This happened when I was 12. My mum never used the computer, and then all of a sudden, she was on it every day and all night. She'd do the same thing your mum would do, minimizing screens, etc. And I just thought it was odd. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking that maybe she was talking to other men while being married to my dad, but I didn't want to believe it. One day, she left her Yahoo Messenger account open, and I decided to be nosy. I knew it wasn't right, but it was driving me crazy. I found her old conversations with lots and lots of men, and it crushed me. Some were intimate, scarred me quite a bit, and some were casual. However, one hurt me the most. Some dude was asking her if she had any kids, and my mum said, "Yeah, I have 2. The oldest one is just a brat, though." She was referring to me. Reading that absolutely crushed me. I never told my dad, even though I wanted to. He found out about her cheating on him later on because of phone records or something, and his friends saw her with other guys when he was out of town. It ended in divorce, but I was honestly happy. Their marriage was horrible, and I wanted it to end. Oh, not good from you, Mama. Not good from you. Especially that your eldest read that you were calling them a brat. Tough stuff. I do really wonder how much our parents do behind our backs and get away with. Do you know what I mean? Story 8. I've written, then subsequently deleted a response to this about 20 times already. I'll try again. First of all, I'm sure the experience is different for everybody, but for me, it was more surreal than anything. When I first walked in, nothing was really registering in my brain. I couldn't really take in what I was seeing, like my mind was playing tricks on me or something. My then wife left the room and offered up what sounded like a rehearsed explanation about why she did it and that it had been a long time coming. None of it really made any sense to me, and it still doesn't to this day. It was incredibly painful and hurtful beyond measure, but I'm a much better person for not being a part of her life any longer. Trying to describe it still seems impossible. I didn't walk in on them. I caught them at a hotel at 3:30 a.m. 3 days before our 9-year anniversary. I banged on the door and threatened them. No one opened the door, and I could hear them whispering to each other somewhere in the room. She was freaking out, crying but trying to muffle the sound. I could hear her telling her side action that I was going to kill them both. I didn't. I told them they could have each other and just walked away. I didn't talk to her after that. One day, after all that, one of her friends told me that the guy she was with in there snuck out of a back window, leaving her for dead after I'd left, thinking I was still there trying to find a way to get in. Story 10. Walked in, saw her on top of him, looked at both of them. They both looked at me like deer in the headlights. I turned around and left after telling her to get the frick out. Friend of mine went there about 2 hours later to verify she'd left before I returned. She came the following weekend to get all of her stuff, and I filed for divorce the following Monday. The only error I made was I forgot she was a card holder on my 2 credit cards. She ran them up that evening before I called the next morning. Wasn't thinking very straight at that point. The only error I made was I forgot she was a card holder on my 2 credit cards. She ran them up that evening before I called the next morning. Wasn't thinking very straight at that point. I might be able to overlook the other rubbish, but this, after the fact, would get her some best served cold at some point. Story 11. I came home from a deployment and walked in with some flowers to surprise her. Found her with my best friend at the time. His face was shocked and terrified. I have issues from past deployments and do not always handle things well. I took a breath and simply said, "Don't mean to interrupt, just need to get my things." I got my guns, my dog, and some workout clothes and went to a friend's house who I knew would help me and not just make me mad or dive into drinking. She was fuming that I did not get mad and still claims it's because I was cheating. He, to this day, is still terrified of me. Oh, I wanted to hit him so badly. I knew, though, that if I did, I would not have stopped and I would have killed him then and there. Sucks to read all these deployment cheating stories. Sorry that happened to you, buddy. I applaud your self-control. I doubt many could pull that off. Oh, with the best friend as well. It literally doesn't get any worse than that. Like, there's plenty more fish in the sea, gang. Why have you got to go for his best mate? Do you know what I mean? I feel sorry for you. I really, really do. And that must have taken some serious self-control to not beat the poo out of him then and there. Story 12. Came home early from the night shift to find her in bed with what I originally thought might have been her mum. Walked up to the bed to make sure the alarm was set and noticed that either her mum was a lot hairier than I thought or it was a guy. So I sat down on the edge of the bed, turned the side lamp on thinking, okay, don't lose it. Turned the bedside lamp on, turned the radio on the alarm clock up to max volume. She opens her eyes and looks up. Looks over the other side of the bed. The dude is starting to wake up. I just looked at her, shook my head, sadly, got up and left. Didn't say a word. Left everything in the house and started anew. Story 13. I got back from seeing my family down south and went to her house to let our dog out since she was at work and I wanted to see the pup. I walked in and heard noises coming from the bedroom and thought it was odd. I go to investigate thinking the dog was tearing something up. Open the door to see a fat ginger beard, balls deep in my girlfriend. She makes eye contact and screams she's sorry. He looks bewildered and just overall confused, and the dog was barking and causing a fuss. I threw my hands up in the air and said, "Frick this," and walked out. I just want to know if you kept the dog. Story 14. I was in college dating a footballer player at a school where football is king. I'd never dated an athlete before, and of course I'd heard warnings, but he just seemed so nice. And he was cute and fun, and I was naive. One night, I decided to stop by his dorm room as a surprise. I get there, and there's a girl in the hall, crying and banging on his door. I ask her what's up. She explains to me that she is his girlfriend, but he's locked himself in his dorm room with another woman, and she's devastated at catching him cheating like this. So in other words, in one moment, I found out my boyfriend had 2 other girlfriends at the same time. I was upset, but really, I just had to laugh. Okay, life, you got me. Never again. It was a great learning experience. Stop it. You found out that your boyfriend had another girlfriend, but was also cheating on his other girlfriend with another girl. What a day, innit? Poor you. Story 15. I walked in after a 10-hour shift at work. They were on the couch where she was under him. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed a glass of something to drink. Walked back into the living room. I told him to stay a bit because she would need help moving out. I told her to pack her rubbish. Then I sat down in my chair and turned on the TV. It took all of an hour for her to get her rubbish. The dude left immediately. She bawled her eyes out while sitting at my feet. Commercials came on and I looked at her and asked, "What the heck are you still doing here?" I shut down. It was a strange feeling. For a moment in my life, I just didn't care. Story 16. Silence. Got my stuff, which is what I was there to retrieve in the first place, and calmly put it in my bag and fricked off back home. In hindsight, I'm truly shocked that I didn't fly off the handle. At the time, I could barely process exactly how fuming I was. Of course, by the time I was out of there, I'd come up with a long list of things I wish I could have done or said, instead of disappointed silence. Silence kills more than words. Oh, that's one thing I hate, when you're in a certain situation where you're angry and then you leave the situation and you think, oh, why didn't I say that? Or, oh, why didn't I do that? Do you know what I mean? It's so annoying because you think of this entire list that you could have said to the person at the time and you just didn't say any of it. But you are right. Silence says the most, I think, in any situation. It really does. Story 17. I came home from work and opened my door to find my wife asleep in a pile of people. Some I knew, some I didn't. So I laughed. I then sorted through a beer bottle and ashtray deluge, got my cat and left. She woke up in time to follow my truck through the parking lot. I moved on. That was it. Why bother being mad? All it does is hurt you more. Knock, knock. Hello, I'm here for the gangbang. Story 18. About 14 years ago, I caught a girl I was dating for about 6 months blowing some guy in a bedroom at a party we went to. I walked in, saw her and said, well, we're pretty much done. Turned and walked out. I was walking out of the house and she chased me down. She started yelling at me that it was my fault I caught her and I shouldn't be mad because she was trying to hide it. My wife and I had her as a waitress last year and she's still mad at me. She walked to our table, saw it was me, and walked off. About 2 minutes later, a different person was our server. Okay, this is one thing I fully don't understand. Like, why do people blame you? Is that just like a defense mechanism? But a lot of these stories have said that people turn around and then they blame the person who caught them for catching them. It's like, are you guys all right in the head? Like, obviously not. Story 19. I walked up to him, smacked him, and then climbed out the window in a screaming fit. It wasn't the reaction of a well-adjusted person, that's for sure. Never heard of the one being cheated on making a window escape. Sorry for your bad experience, but the mental image is very funny. See, you never know how you're going to react, do you? You never know. Like, I bet that person did not think if they caught someone cheating, they'd jump out the window. Do you know what I mean? Story 20. This happened to my grandma. She walked in on her husband at the time in bed with her best friend. She told me she had a seat and waited for them to notice her. When they did, she just sat there and said, oh no, you go ahead and finish. She apparently was trying to make it as awkward and uncomfortable for them as possible. Yes, preach, Granny. That is the way to handle it. Story 21. You know that look you get when you drop something delicious on the ground and you're debating whether or not to pick it up and eat it anyways? Your eyes squint a little and your mouth tightens. Maybe you let out a slight, That describes it the best I can. Of course I was devastated on the inside, but I wasn't going to let anyone see that, especially her. Story 22. Surprised my significant other by showing up at her apartment. She has this dude there that she was cheating on me with our whole relationship. Found out after breakup. Dude just stood there smiling and I lost my temper. Broke his nose, knocked out 2 to 3 teeth and shattered his mandible. Now doing anger management for it. Should have just walked away. Story 23. Fought him. Broke rubbish. Walls. Door. Arrested. 6 charges. Hefty lawyer bill. $20,000 later. So not worth it. Walk the frick away and move on with your life. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.